The gymnasium fell silent as Riley Thompson stood at the free throw line, her trembling hands gripping the worn leather basketball that seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. The scoreboard glowed mercilessly overhead, Ravens 67, Eagles 68, with 8 seconds left in the Illinois State Championship game. Every eye in the packed arena was on the 16-year-old girl who'd been playing in secret for 3 years, hiding her talent behind the shadow of grief and a promise she'd made to a ghost. The weight of her brother's jersey, number 23, the same one he'd worn before the accident, pressed against her shoulders like a protective embrace. And for the first time since that terrible night, she could almost hear Marcus whispering in her ear, "Just like we practiced, Riles. Just like we practiced." This was the moment she'd dreamed of and feared in equal measure. The culmination of countless hours shooting alone in the dark, perfecting a gift she'd buried with her big brother 2 years ago. 3 years earlier, before the accident that shattered the Thompson family, Riley had been just another kid's sister, tagging along to her brother's basketball practices in the small town of Cedar Falls, Illinois. She'd sit in the bleachers of Lincoln High's gymnasium, homework spread across her lap, pretending to study while actually memorizing every move Marcus made on the court. He was everything she wanted, to be confident, fearless, beloved by everyone, in their tight-knit farming community where basketball wasn't just a sport, it was religion. "You got game, little sis," he'd tell her during their secret one-on-one sessions in their backyard, where an old hoop hung crooked on their barn. "But, promise me something, when I'm gone to college, you'll try out for the team. Don't let that talent go to waste." She'd laughed then, thinking college was the only thing that would ever take her brother away from her. The memory of that promise now felt like both a blessing and a curse. As Riley prepared for the most important shots of her life, knowing that, somewhere in the packed stands, her parents were holding their breath, finally understanding that their daughter had inherited more than just Marcus's jersey, she'd inherited his heart, his determination, and his unbreakable will to never give up when it mattered most. This was her story, her moment. Her chance to honor the brother who'd believed in her before she'd ever believed in herself. And no matter what happened in the next 8 seconds, she was ready to let the world see what she'd been hiding in the shadows for far too long. Hello my friends. Before we continue our story, leave your like, share the story, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Cedar Falls, Illinois, was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where the grain elevator could be seen from 20 miles away, and where Friday night lights meant one thing: Lincoln High basketball. Population 3,847, nestled between endless cornfields and the Sangamon River. It was a town that lived and breathed through the rhythm of seasons: planting, growing, harvesting, and basketball. The Thompson family had called Cedar Falls home for 4 generations, with Riley's dad, Tom, running Thompson Farm Supply on Main Street, and her mum, Sarah, teaching 3rd grade at Cedar Elementary. Their modest 2-story house on Maple Street sat just 6 blocks from the high school, close enough that Riley could hear the roar of the crowd on game nights, a sound that used to fill her with excitement but now only reminded her of everything she'd lost. Marcus Thompson had been Cedar Falls' golden boy, the kind of player who came along once in a generation, standing 6'4", with a smile that could light up the whole gymnasium and a work ethic that made grown men shake their heads in admiration. "That boy's got more heart than talent," Coach Rodriguez used to say, "and he's got enough talent to play Division I." Riley remembered sitting in those bleachers every Friday night, watching her big brother dominate the court with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. The way he could thread a pass through traffic, or sink a three-pointer when the pressure was highest. The whole town rallied around Marcus, wearing his number 23 on homemade t-shirts, following the team to away games in caravans of pickup trucks and minivans. For Riley, those were the golden days, when basketball meant family time, community pride, and the unshakable belief that her brother was invincible. Everything changed on March 15th, 2 years ago, when Marcus was driving home from a recruiting visit to the University of Illinois. Riley remembered the exact moment their world collapsed, She was in the kitchen helping her mum prepare dinner, arguing about whether they should make Marcus's favorite cornbread to celebrate his successful campus visit. When the phone rang, the Illinois State Police delivered the news with practiced efficiency: icy roads, an 18-wheeler that couldn't stop in time, and just like that, the brightest light in Cedar Falls was extinguished. Riley watched her parents crumble that night, saw her father, a man who'd never shed a tear in front of his children, sob like a broken child in the hospital waiting room. The whole town seemed to dim after Marcus's funeral, as if someone had turned down the volume on life itself. Basketball season ended early that year, with the team dedicating their remaining games to their fallen teammates. But it wasn't the same. Nothing was the same. In the months that followed, Riley found herself drawn to the one place that still held traces of her brother's presence: the basketball court. At first, she'd just sit in the empty gymnasium after school, staring at the banners hanging from the rafters, including the conference championship banner from Marcus's senior year. "You're gonna think I'm crazy," she whispered to the empty air one afternoon, "but I keep thinking you're gonna walk through those doors and tell me this was all some sick joke." The janitor, old Mr. Peterson, found her there one evening, and instead of shooing her away, he tossed her a basketball. "Your brother used to say you had better form than half the boys' team," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time you showed somebody what he was talking about." That night, alone in the darkened gym with only the emergency lights casting long shadows across the hardwood, Riley took her first real shot since Marcus died. It swished through the net like a whisper, and for just a moment, she could swear she heard her brother's voice echoing off the walls. "That's my girl." From that night forward, Riley began a secret ritual that would define the next 2 years of her life. Every evening after her parents thought she was asleep, she'd slip out of the house and make her way to the school gymnasium, where Mr. Peterson had started leaving a side door unlocked. She'd spend hours in that darkened space, working on the moves Marcus had taught her in their backyard, perfecting shots she'd only dreamed of making, developing skills that would have made her brother proud. "I'm not ready for anyone to see this yet," she'd whisper to the empty bleachers, imagining Marcus sitting in his usual spot, number 23 jersey gleaming under the lights. She practiced in silence, the only sounds the rhythmic bounce of the ball and the sweet swish of net, building muscle memory and confidence in equal measure. Her secret sessions became her therapy, her connection to Marcus, and slowly, her path back to the living dot. As Riley entered her junior year, she'd grown 3 inches and developed the kind of basketball instincts that couldn't be taught, they could only be inherited. Coach Martinez, who ran the girls' basketball program, had been dropping hints about tryouts for months. Having heard rumors about Riley's late-night practice sessions from Mr. Peterson, "Your brother always said you had game," Coach Martinez told her one day after chemistry class. Maybe it's time Cedar Falls got to see what he was talking about. But Riley wasn't ready for that kind of attention, wasn't ready for the comparisons, the expectations, the pressure of living up to Marcus's legacy. She had his talent, his dedication, and his love for the game. But she wasn't sure she had his courage to perform when the whole town was watching. The turning point came on a cold February night when Riley discovered a box in Marcus's old room that her parents had been unable to touch since his death. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was his game jersey, the number 23 he'd worn with such pride, still carrying the faint scent of his cologne and the memories of 100 victories. Tucked beneath the jersey was a letter addressed to Little Sis, written in Marcus's familiar handwriting. "If you're reading this," it began, "then something happened to me. And I need you to remember what I always told you: you got game, Riley Thompson, and the world deserves to see it. Don't let fear keep you from becoming who you were meant to be. Wear this jersey with pride, play with heart, and show Cedar Falls that the Thompson basketball legacy isn't over, it's just getting started." The letter from Marcus changed everything. But Riley knew she couldn't just walk into Coach Martinez's office and announce she was ready to play varsity basketball. Not after spending 2 years in self-imposed exile from the sport that had defined her family. Instead, she started small, joining pickup games at the community center on Saturday mornings. where a mix of high school players, college kids home for the weekend, and local adults gathered for informal competition. The first time she walked through those doors, clutching Marcus's jersey in her gym bag like a talisman, she felt every eye in the place tracking her movement. "Hey, ain't you Marcus Thompson's little sister?" called out Jake Morrison, a senior on the boys' team who'd played alongside her brother. "Heard you got some skills?" Riley just nodded, too nervous to trust her voice, and when they picked teams, she found herself matched up against players who'd known her as the quiet girl who used to keep stats for the boys' team. The rust showed. In her first few possessions, her timing was off. Her shots were short, and she couldn't quite sync up with the rhythm of competitive play after years of solitary practice. But then something clicked. Muscle memory kicked in, and Riley began moving with a fluid grace that had been her brother's trademark. She drove to the basket with authority, sank three-pointers from spots Marcus had shown her, and displayed court vision that made the older players stop and take notice. "Damn girl," laughed Tony Vasquez, a former college player who worked at the grain elevator. "You been hiding this from us?" By the end of the morning, Riley had scored 28 points and earned the kind of respect that couldn't be faked. More importantly, she'd remembered why she'd fallen in love with basketball in the first place, not because of Marcus, but because of how it made her feel complete. Word spread quickly through Cedar Falls' tight-knit community. The way news always did in small towns where secrets were harder to keep than corn in a silo. Coach Martinez heard about Riley's Saturday morning performances from multiple sources, and by Monday morning, she was waiting by Riley's locker with a practice jersey and a gentle but persistent invitation. "I've been patient for 2 years," Coach Martinez said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been coaching girls basketball for 15 years. "But I can't keep pretending I don't know what you're capable of. We need you, Riley, and more importantly, you need us." The timing was perfect, in a way that felt almost like divine intervention. The team's starting point guard had transferred schools, leaving a gap in the lineup that Riley's skills could fill perfectly. "I know you're scared," Coach Martinez continued, "but fear is just excitement without breath. Take a deep breath, and let's see what happens." Riley's parents had mixed reactions to the news that their daughter wanted to join the basketball team. Her father, still struggling with his own grief, worried that basketball would bring back too many painful memories of Marcus, while her mother feared that Riley was trying to replace her brother rather than honor him. "Honey, you don't have to do this," Sarah Thompson said one evening, as they sat in the kitchen where they'd received the news of Marcus's accident. "You don't owe anybody anything." But Riley had already made up her mind, and she could see in her father's eyes a flicker of the excitement he used to feel when Marcus played. "Maybe she does owe somebody something," Thompson said quietly, looking at the collection of Marcus's trophies that still decorated the mantelpiece. "Maybe she owes it to herself to find out how good she can be." That night, they sat together as a family and looked through old photo albums, sharing memories of Marcus and talking about basketball in a way they hadn't been able to since his death. The first official practice was both exhilarating and terrifying, with Riley wearing Marcus's number 23 jersey for the first time in public. Coach Martinez had retired the number after his death, but she made an exception that felt both appropriate and powerful. The other girls on the team, most of whom had known Marcus and remembered Riley from her elementary school days, welcomed her with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. Jessica Chen, the team captain, and a senior who'd been friends with Marcus, pulled Riley aside before the first drill. "I know this is weird for you," she said, adjusting her own ponytail with the nervous energy of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. "But your brother always said you were gonna be better than him. Time to prove him right." The practice itself was a revelation. Riley discovered that years of solo training had actually prepared her well for team play, and her basketball IQ was immediately apparent to everyone in the gymnasium. Coach Martinez structured the early practices to ease Riley into the team dynamic, pairing her with veterans who could help her adjust to the speed and physicality of organized basketball. "You've got all the tools," Coach told her after a particularly impressive scrimmage session. "But basketball is a team sport, And that means learning to trust your teammates as much as they trust you. Riley found herself forming quick bonds with her new teammates, especially Maria Santos, a junior forward whose work ethic matched Riley's own, and Ashley Washington, a senior guard whose leadership skills reminded Riley of Marcus's ability to elevate everyone around him. The chemistry was immediate and obvious, with Riley's playmaking ability opening up scoring opportunities for her teammates while their movement created space for Riley to showcase her own skills. The breakthrough came during a close scrimmage against their crosstown rivals, Lincoln Prep, when Riley scored 18 points and dished out 7 assists in a performance that had college scouts texting coaches across the Midwest before the final buzzer. "I ain't seen talent like that since Marcus," whispered the Lincoln Prep coach to his assistant, not knowing that Riley could hear every word from the free throw line. After the scrimmage, Coach Martinez pulled Riley aside and delivered news that would change everything. The University of Illinois, the same school Marcus had been planning to attend, had already expressed interest in Riley's development. "They want to keep an eye on you this season," Coach said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "But remember, that's not pressure, that's opportunity." Riley nodded, feeling the weight of Marcus's jersey against her skin, and knowing that her brother would have been proud to see his little sister taking the first steps toward her own basketball destiny. The regular season began with cautious optimism from the Cedar Falls community. But Riley quickly discovered that playing basketball while carrying the weight of her brother's legacy was more complicated than she'd anticipated. The local newspaper ran a feature story with the headline, "Thompson Legacy Lives On," complete with side-by-side photos of Riley and Marcus in their number 23 jerseys. And suddenly, everyone in town had an opinion about whether she was honoring her brother's memory or trying to replace him. "She's got his shot," old-timers would say, at the diner on Main Street, but does she have his heart? The pressure intensified after Riley's first official game, where she scored 22 points in a victory over Bloomington Central, leading to comparisons that felt both flattering and suffocating. Local sports blogger Danny Chen wrote, "Riley Thompson doesn't just wear her brother's number, she carries his spirit." But Riley wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a burden she wasn't ready to bear. Academically, Riley faced the challenge that every student-athlete knew but few discussed openly: balancing the demands of a rigorous practice schedule with the reality of keeping grades high enough to maintain eligibility and attract college attention. Her AP classes suddenly felt more demanding when she was spending 3 hours every afternoon in the gymnasium, and her teachers, while supportive, couldn't make assignments disappear just because she had games twice a week. Time management is the difference between good players and great players. Coach Martinez reminded the team during a particularly stressful week when Riley had scored 31 points in a victory over Quincy High but failed a chemistry test. The next day, Mrs. Rodriguez, her chemistry teacher and the wife of Marcus's former coach, offered to provide extra tutoring sessions, saying, "Your brother was smart enough to know that basketball was temporary, but education lasts forever." The social dynamics of high school became more complex once Riley emerged as the star of the girls' basketball team, with some classmates treating her like a celebrity while others seemed resentful of the attention she received. Dating became virtually impossible when every conversation seemed to revolve around basketball or Marcus, and Riley found herself feeling isolated even when surrounded by teammates and friends. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a fishbowl," she confided to Jessica Chen after a particularly difficult day when 3 different college recruiters had approached her. "In the hallway between classes, everyone's watching to see if I'm going to measure up to Marcus, and I'm not even sure what that means anymore." The weight of expectation was heaviest at home, where her parents tried to be supportive but couldn't hide their own emotional struggles with seeing their daughter succeed in the sport that had brought them so much joy and heartbreak. The physical demands of varsity basketball pushed Riley's body in ways that her secret practice sessions never had, and she quickly learned the difference between playing alone and competing against increasingly aggressive opponents who saw her as a marked player. During a heated rivalry game against Springfield Southeast, Riley suffered her first significant injury when a hard foul sent her crashing into the scorer's table, resulting in a sprained wrist that kept her out of action for 2 weeks. "This is part of the game," Coach Martinez explained as they sat in the training room. Riley's wrist wrapped in ice and her confidence shaken. Marcus dealt with injuries too, but what made him special was how he came back stronger. The injury forced Riley to watch from the sidelines as her team struggled without her, losing 3 straight games and falling from first place to 4th in the conference standings. The emotional low point came during Riley's return game against Peoria Manual, when she played tentatively, clearly favoring her previously injured wrist and second-guessing every aggressive move she'd made naturally before the injury. She scored only 8 points in a disappointing loss, and the local sports radio shows spent the next week debating whether Riley Thompson was a one-hit wonder who had benefited from early season hype. "Maybe the pressure got to her," suggested one caller, while another said, "She ain't her brother, that's for sure." Riley heard every word, reading every article and listening to every podcast that mentioned her name, feeding her insecurities with each critical comment. That night, she sat alone in Marcus's old room, holding his jersey and wondering if she'd made a mistake thinking she could fill his shoes. The crisis deepened when college scouts began expressing concerns about Riley's consistency, with one coach telling a reporter, "She's got tremendous upside, but we need to see how she responds to adversity before we make any commitments." The University of Illinois, which had been Riley's dream school and Marcus's intended destination, sent a polite but pointed message through their assistant coach. They were monitoring the situation but would need to see significant improvement before offering a scholarship. Riley's parents tried to be supportive, but she could see the worry in their eyes. The fear that their daughter was setting herself up for the same kind of heartbreak that had devastated them when Marcus died. "Maybe it's time to consider other options," her mother suggested gently one evening after another disappointing performance. "Basketball doesn't have to define you the way it defined Marcus." The rock-bottom moment came during senior night against Champaign Central, when Riley was matched up against Destiny Williams, a McDonald's All-American who had already committed to UConn and seemed determined to make a statement against the local player who'd been receiving so much attention. Williams dominated the matchup, scoring 28 points while holding Riley to just 12. And after the game, she made a comment to reporters that cut deeper than any injury. "Riley Thompson is a good player, but she's living in her brother's shadow, and that ain't no place to build a career." The quote went viral on local social media, and Riley found herself questioning everything: her talent, her motivation, her right to wear Marcus's number, and whether she was honoring his memory or diminishing it by trying to follow in his footsteps. When she clearly wasn't ready for the spotlight he'd handled so effortlessly. The turning point came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Dorothy Thompson, Riley's 84-year-old grandmother, who had been quietly watching her granddaughters struggles from the assisted living facility where she'd moved after Marcus's death. Nana Thompson had been a basketball player herself in the 1950s, back when girls' basketball was played with different rules and far less recognition, but she understood the game in ways that transcended generations. One Sunday afternoon, she asked Riley to wheel her out to the small basketball court behind the facility, where she'd been shooting baskets with the physical therapy staff to maintain her mobility. "Honey," she said in her gentle but firm voice, "you've been carrying your brother's memory like it's a 100-pound backpack, when you should be carrying it like it's wings." Her wrinkled hands still showed perfect form as she demonstrated a free throw technique, and Riley realized that basketball had been in their family blood longer than she'd ever known. Marcus wasn't trying to be like anybody else when he played, Nana Thompson continued, sinking 3 consecutive shots from her wheelchair with a confidence that made Riley smile for the first time in weeks. He was trying to be the best Marcus. He could be been trying to be Marcus when you should be trying to be the best, Riley. She told stories Riley had never heard before about Marcus's early struggles with confidence, his fears about living up to expectations, and the night before his first varsity game when he'd called his grandmother, crying because he was afraid he wasn't good enough. That boy was scared just like you are, Nana said, passing the ball to Riley with surprising strength. But he learned. That fear is just excitement without direction. You got the excitement, baby girl, you just need to point it in the right direction. The revelation continued during an unexpected visit from Marcus's former teammate, David Rodriguez, who was home from his freshman year at Illinois State University. David had been Marcus's best friend and the only person who knew about the secret. One-on-one games, Marcus and Riley used to play in their backyard. Your brother used to tell everyone that you were going to be better than him, David said, as they sat in the Thompson family kitchen, drinking sweet tea and looking through old photo albums. But what he really meant was that you were going to be different than him, better in your own way. David revealed that Marcus had been keeping a journal during his senior year, documenting not just his own progress but Riley's development during their backyard sessions. He wrote that you had something he didn't have. You could make everyone around you better just by being yourself. The breakthrough came during a conversation with Coach Martinez, who had been patiently waiting for Riley to find her own identity as a player rather than trying to be a copy of her brother. I've been coaching for 20 years, Coach said, as they sat in her office after another disappointing practice. And I can tell the difference between a player who's trying to be someone else and a player who's trying to be themselves. Got natural leadership skills that your brother never had. He was a scorer, but you're a floor general. He played with passion, but you play with intelligence. Stop trying to be Marcus Thompson's little sister and start being Riley Thompson, point guard. The distinction hit Riley like a revelation, and she realized that she'd been measuring herself against Marcus's scoring statistics when her real strength was in making her teammates better. The transformation began subtly, with Riley focusing on assists rather than points, studying game film to understand defensive schemes, and developing the kind of basketball IQ that made coaches across the state take notice. During practice, she started calling out plays before Coach Martinez could diagram them, anticipating defensive adjustments with an intuition that seemed almost supernatural. You see the game differently than most players, observed the team's assistant coach, a former college player who had worked with dozens of highly recruited athletes. You don't just play basketball, you think basketball. Riley's teammates began responding to her leadership in ways they never had before, with Maria Santos commenting, "Riley makes me want to be better. Not just at basketball, but at everything." The confidence-building process accelerated when Riley discovered Marcus's hidden stash of basketball books and DVDs in the garage, including instructional materials from legendary point guards like Magic Johnson, John Stockton, and Sue Bird. He was studying to be a coach, she realized, reading margin notes in Marcus's handwriting that showed he'd been thinking about basketball strategy on a level she'd never imagined. She spent hours watching game film and reading about basketball philosophy, developing an understanding of the game that went far beyond individual skills. "Basketball is chess, not checkers," she wrote in a journal she started keeping, echoing advice she'd found in Marcus's notes. "Every move affects every other move, and the best players think 3 steps ahead." The preparation for the season's final stretch became a family affair, with her parents finally embracing Riley's basketball journey as something separate and distinct from Marcus's legacy. Her father, who had been hesitant to get too involved because of the painful memories, started attending practices and offering the kind of technical advice he'd once given to Marcus. "You got your own style," he told Riley one evening as they worked on ball handling drills in the backyard, using the same hoop where Marcus had first taught her to shoot. "And that's something to be proud of, not something to change." Her mother began keeping detailed statistics of Riley's games, not to compare them to Marcus's numbers, but to track Riley's unique contributions, assists, defensive stops, leadership moments that didn't show up in the box score but made all the difference in winning and losing. The regional championship game against Quincy Notre Dame represented everything Riley had been working toward. And as the team bus pulled into the parking lot of the packed Illinois High School Association arena, she could feel the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders like Marcus's jersey. The gymnasium was electric, with an energy that reminded her of the state tournament games she'd attended as a child. When Marcus was playing, and the whole town of Cedar Falls would make the 2-hour drive to watch their hometown hero compete against the best players in Illinois. Now it was her turn, and the pressure was both terrifying and exhilarating. "This is what we've been preparing for all season," Coach Martinez reminded the team as they huddled in the visiting locker room, surrounded by the smell of linen and the nervous energy that comes before the biggest game of young athletes' lives. "Trust your training, trust each other, and play Riley's games, smart, unselfish, and with heart." The pre-game atmosphere was unlike anything Riley had experienced. With nearly 4,000 fans packed into the arena, and college scouts from across the Midwest sitting in a designated section, their notepads and stopwatches ready to evaluate the players who might join their programs in the fall. Riley's parents sat in the front row of the Cedar Falls section, wearing matching t-shirts with Riley's number and name, their faces showing a mixture of pride and anxiety that she recognized from old photos of Marcus's games. The Quincy Notre Dame Raiders were undefeated and ranked second in the state, led by senior guard Alexandra Morrison, a player who had already signed with Notre Dame University and was considered one of the top prospects in the region. "They're gonna try to speed us up and force turnovers," Riley told her teammates during warm-ups, her voice carrying the authority of a seasoned floor general. "But if we stay disciplined and run our offense, we can control this game." The opening minutes were a feeling-out process, with both teams playing cautiously and neither able to establish a significant advantage. Riley started slowly, missing her first 2 shots and turning the ball over on an aggressive steal attempt by Morrison, but she could feel herself settling into the rhythm of the game as the first quarter progressed. "That's okay, Riles," called out Jessica Chen after Riley's second missed shot. "Keep shooting, they're gonna fall." The breakthrough came midway through the second quarter, when Riley found her groove with a sequence that showcased everything she'd learned about playing point guard rather than trying to be a scorer. She hit Maria Santos with a no-look pass for an easy layup, stole the ensuing inbound pass and found Ashley Washington for a three-pointer, then capped the run with a driving layup of her own that gave Cedar Falls their first double-digit lead of the game by halftime. Riley had recorded 12 points and 8 assists. But more importantly, she'd established herself as the floor general who was controlling the tempo and making her teammates better. "You're playing like a senior," Coach Martinez told her during the halftime break. "But remember, they're going to make adjustments in the second half. Morrison is too good a player to let you dictate the game for 40 minutes. The warning proved prophetic as Quincy Notre Dame came out aggressive in the third quarter, pressing full court and forcing Cedar Falls into rushed possessions that resulted in turnovers and easy baskets. Morrison scored 14 points in the third quarter, consistently attacking Riley on both ends of the floor and trying to establish her dominance in what had become a personal battle between the two floor generals. The fourth quarter became a test of character, with neither team able to gain more than a 5-point advantage and the lead changing hands 6 times in the final 8 minutes. Riley's conditioning from those years of secret practice sessions paid dividends as her teammates began to tire, but she seemed to get stronger as the pressure increased. With 3 minutes remaining and Cedar Falls trailing by 2 points, Riley took over the game in a way that would have made Marcus proud, not by forcing shots, but by making the plays that put her teammates in position to succeed. She found Santos for a go-ahead basket, then stole Morrison's subsequent inbound pass and scored on a fast break that brought the Cedar Falls fans to their feet in delirium. The final minute was pure basketball theater, with both teams executing at the highest level and every possession carrying enormous weight. Morrison answered Riley's basket with a three-pointer that put Quincy Notre Dame back ahead. Then Riley responded with a driving layup through traffic that showcased the fearlessness she'd inherited from her brother. With 15 seconds remaining and Cedar Falls trailing by 1 point, Riley faced the defining moment of her high school career. The Raiders had fouled her intentionally, sending her to the free throw line for 2 shots that would determine whether her team advanced to the state tournament or went home with dreams unfulfilled. As she stood at the line, holding the ball and looking up at the crowd, Riley could almost see Marcus sitting in the stands, wearing his lucky game day shirt, and giving her the same encouraging nod he'd offered during their backyard games years earlier. The first free throw was perfect, swishing through the net and tying the game at 68-68, but the second shot felt different, heavier somehow, with the weight of expectations and the knowledge that missing would likely end her team's championship hopes. Riley went through her pre-shot routine, the same one Marcus had taught her during those summer evenings when they'd practice free throws until dark. And as she released the ball, she could hear her brother's voice in her memory. "Follow through, Riles. Trust your form." The ball arced through the air in what felt like slow motion, hit the back of the rim, bounced straight up, and dropped through the net as the Cedar Falls section erupted in celebration, and Riley's teammates mobbed her at center court, knowing they were going to state, and that Riley Thompson had finally stepped out of her brother's shadow to create her own legendary moment. The immediate aftermath of the championship victory was a blur of tears, hugs, and the kind of pure joy that comes from achieving something that seemed impossible just months earlier. Riley found herself surrounded by teammates, coaches, family members, and fans who had watched her journey from the quiet girl who kept stats to the floor general, who had just led Cedar Falls High School to its first state tournament appearance in 15 years. The local newspaper photographer captured the moment when Riley's parents reached her at center court, their faces showing the complex emotions of pride, relief, and the bittersweet recognition that their daughter had found her own path to greatness. "Marcus would be so proud," her father whispered as he hugged Riley tightly. And for the first time since her brother's death, those words brought comfort rather than pressure. Coach Martinez later said it was the most complete performance she'd ever seen from a high school point guard. Not because of Riley's statistics, 14 points, 11 assists, and just 2 turnovers, but because of the way she'd elevated everyone around her when the stakes were highest. The long-term impact of Riley's breakthrough season extended far beyond basketball statistics and championship banners. College recruiters who had been lukewarm about her prospects earlier in the season were now calling daily, with the University of Illinois offering a full scholarship and the opportunity to play for the same program Marcus had dreamed of joining. "She's not just a player," the Illinois coach told the local media. "She's a program changer who makes everyone around her better." But perhaps more importantly, Riley had helped her family heal from the grief that had consumed them for 2 years, showing them that honoring Marcus's memory didn't mean living in his shadow, but rather finding the courage to create their own legacy. The community of Cedar Falls embraced Riley's success as proof that their small town could still produce special athletes. And the local youth basketball programs saw a surge in participation from young girls who wanted to follow in Riley Thompson's footsteps. The life lessons Riley learned during her journey from secret player to state tournament qualifier would serve her well beyond basketball. She'd discovered that authenticity was more powerful than imitation, that leadership was about making others better rather than seeking personal glory, and that the best way to honor someone's memory was to become the best version of yourself. "I spent 2 years trying to be Marcus," she reflected in an interview with the local newspaper, "when what I really needed to do was figure out how to be Riley." The experience taught her that pressure could be either paralyzing or motivating, depending on how you chose to interpret it, and that the support of family and community could help anyone overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Her grandmother's wisdom about carrying Marcus's memory like wings rather than a backpack became a philosophy that Riley would carry into college and beyond. Riley's character transformation was evident to everyone who had known her before and after her basketball journey. The shy, grief-stricken girl who had hidden her talents for years had become a confident young woman who understood her own worth and wasn't afraid to pursue her dreams. She'd learned to accept the comparisons to Marcus as a compliment rather than a burden, understanding that being associated with excellence was something to embrace rather than run from. Her teammates noted how Riley had become a natural leader not just on the basketball court but in the classroom and community. organizing study groups for struggling students and volunteering at youth basketball camps during the summer. She makes everyone around her want to be better, observed Jessica Chen, now Riley's co-captain and best friend. The impact on Cedar Falls extended beyond individual transformation, as Riley's success helped the entire community process their collective grief over Marcus's death and find new reasons for hope and celebration. The local elementary school started a basketball program for girls. Inspired by Riley's example, an enrollment in the high school's academic programs increased as students wanted to attend the same school that had produced such remarkable athletes. Mr. Peterson, the janitor who had first encouraged Riley to pick up a basketball in the empty gymnasium, was promoted to facilities director and given the honor of hanging Riley's jersey in the rafters alongside Marcus's, creating a Thompson family section that represented the continuing legacy of excellence and determination. The story of Riley's journey from secret player to state tournament star became part of Cedar Falls folklore, told and retold at Friday night games and community gatherings as proof that with enough heart and determination, anyone could overcome tragedy and achieve greatness. The universal message of Riley Thompson's story resonated far beyond the boundaries of small-town Illinois. Speaking to anyone who had ever felt the weight of living up to someone else's legacy or struggled to find their own identity in the shadow of greatness, her journey proved that the best way to honor those we've lost is not to become carbon copies of them, but to take the lessons they taught us and apply them in our own unique way. Riley learned that Marcus's greatest gift to her wasn't his basketball skills or his jersey number, but his belief in her potential to become something special in her own right. The story became a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of community support, and the truth that our greatest strengths often emerge from our deepest struggles. As Riley prepared for her senior season and the next chapter of her life at the University of Illinois, she carried with her the knowledge that she had not only survived the loss of her brother, but had found a way to transform that grief into purpose, that pain into power, and that shadow into her own brilliant light. The closing image that would stay with everyone who witnessed Riley's journey was the sight of her standing at center court after the championship victory, wearing Marcus's number 23 jersey, but no longer trying to fill his shoes. Instead, she had found her own path to greatness, proving that sometimes the most powerful way to honor the past is to courageously embrace the future, and that the strongest wings are those built not from trying to fly like someone else, but from finding the courage to soar in your own unique way toward dreams that are entirely your own.